Objections.
Okay. Objections. Let me make a couple notes. And side note, I took a bunch of notes of my favorite closes, my favorite objection handling techniques, my favorite negotiations. So I'll intertwine these as we go through them. And if we haven't covered them, I'm going to list them, before we wrap up tonight. And side note, there's good problems and bad problems in life and in real estate. So I'll give you an example. If I represent a seller in my first listing conversation with them, I'm going to tell them there's good problems and bad problems. And they're going to say, what do you mean? Well, bad problems, no offers. A great problem is somebody brings you a low offer and we have an opportunity to negotiate up. Now, Elizabeth, what I'm thinking about when you're commenting, when somebody's giving me an objection, why do I think that's a good thing? Anybody care to guess? Why are objections good?
Spot for negotiation.
Yeah, it's opportunity for negotiation. What's bad is, now I'm not interested. Click. So if somebody's objection handling, there's some interest, there's some limit, there's some belief there that we have to power through. One or two more people, what comes to mind tonight that you want to make sure that we cover so you walk away being glad you spent time on a Wednesday night with this guy from Vermont?
I guess one or two things that you see the most as far as either objection handling or negotiation tactics you have to regularly use. I know it seems like with this current market, we're hearing that a lot of people are hesitant to pull the trigger because of price or the interest rate. I'm assuming those are probably two of the most common ones, but just curious if there's anything you're regularly handling, whether over the phone or in person.
Yeah, and I might tackle that one right off the bat, and then I'll ask for one more and we'll get rock and rolling. So I've been in the business 30 years, started off, I think it was mid 90s rates, and I was a loan officer. First 2 weeks, rates went from 9.5% to 10%. Some of you heard the story on the session I was on last week. And I was so wet behind the ears, I didn't know why people in the mortgage company were freaking out. And they explained it to me, and if I had understood, I wouldn't be here tonight. But like that market, right now we're in a market where we as agents need to find the most motivated people. So I'll give you an example. My amazing second wife and I, and an amazing first one too, lost her to cancer. The first, Kathy and I said, we'd like to upgrade. We'd like to be on the lake. We'd like to. We're not necessarily the best buyers because we'd like to doesn't describe actual needs. Rena, you're shaking your head. What are you thinking right there?
Because it's more of a want than a need.
Bingo. And Brett, and I encourage people, if you can, come off or put cameras on so we can make it as personable as possible. If you can't, don't worry about it. And if you're not dressed up pretty, don't worry about it. Side note, I used to have double mohawks, Liberty spikes, and I ended up in a button-down shirt somehow. So Brett, the other thing to comment is, to me, the ideal client right now is somebody who really needs something. That family who's got another baby on the way, who's already had 2 kids sharing a room. I hate to say it, divorce, death, and I don't mean that as in I celebrate that. I've lost loved ones. It sucks. Excuse my language. That being said, divorce attorneys are great sources of business. Bankruptcy attorneys are great sources of business. I knew one agent advertising a funeral home director, situation. So right now, I would say, Brett, the biggest thing we need to do is find those people who are motivated. Now, diving in a little bit deeper, Brett, to your question to try to give you a better answer. And guys, if I don't give you a good answer, challenge me. Rates are a common thing, and now should we buy now? So a big phrase that we've used a lot is, hey, Brett, I can absolutely appreciate your concerns about the interest rate. One of the things I recommend is marry the house, date the rate. What do you mean, Brian? The question might be for you, Brett, does the lot work? Does the layout work? Does the location work? And if that's the case, you can refinance in a matter of years. Can't guarantee the rate's going to go down, but there's a good chance that it will. Yet sometimes the best thing an investor can do is buy when the market's a little soft or rates are up, and then refinance when the market goes down. I will say buyer trepidation and just general concern as the market is the biggest thing I can see. I've got my hands, real estate's my number one oak, KW Vermont, property management company that manages give or take 225 units. I own a few rentals myself, have my hands in a closet storage company and a vertically integrated cannabis company. The threat of tariffs, and I don't want to get political, but the threat of tariffs has impacted all of my businesses except property management. We need stability coming out of Washington, and it's not what we're getting right now. And if I offend you, let me know so I can grow.
No, but that's good to know that the only one that actually is stable right now. It's kind of reassuring that the housing market in general is a relatively stable investment, no matter how you slice it, and unless you go in on a bad deal. But I mean, if you have a good realtor,
yeah, and everybody, if I get sidetracked, don't hesitate to bring it back. But if this is helpful, let's keep going with it just a little bit, and then we'll dive in. You know, Brett, of all the things that I've invested in, you know, companies and people, real estate is the overall number one most secure and lucrative at the same time. You guys as real estate agents can benefit from Section 925C of the IRS, you know, which you can use potentially losses on investment properties to actually, you know, to bring down your, you know, your taxable income. Side note, just to be a disclosure, I'm not a tax advisor or anything you follow up on that I say, check with a tax advisor, so forth and so on. The other thing as well, and I don't know all your markets, but, you know, most of us are in the Northeast. It's true. They're just not making any more dirt. So to me, you know, the people that I worry about, if they're buying a property for 1 to 2 years, you know, that might be a challenge. But if they're looking for 5 to 7, most of the time I wouldn't worry about it, save if they're buying it in the extreme upper end or extreme unique. And I should actually probably give a disclosure that KW doesn't want me to, it hasn't asked me to give, and then I'll give some official ones. And then we'll start rock and rolling. So I'm in the state of Vermont. And I'm licensed in New Hampshire as well. In the state of Vermont, we can work with buyers as clients and as customers. I don't know each one of your states. So, you know, if I give you an idea that seems interesting or unique around how to work with buyers or negotiation, please don't hesitate to run it by your team lead, your principal broker, so forth. So, example, New Hampshire allows disclosed dual agency. Vermont does not. In Vermont, we can still work with buyers and customers, even though the NAR settlement says we have to have something signed because it's Vermont state law. Any other thoughts, questions, random ideas before we get into this and hopefully have some fun and help each other grow? And again, folks, challenge me and ask questions. Elizabeth.
I'm sorry. I like your
don't be.
style,
This is
so
awesome.
that's why.
Appreciate it.
Maybe later, I would like to know if I wanted to learn more about property management or commercial real estate or new homes. If you can suggest something, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, and actually, I'll tackle that one right off the bat. Rich Dad Poor Dad is a great appetite whetter, if you will, of why real estate, you know, is an important piece. The Millionaire Real Estate Investor I liked, but I didn't love. I thought that was a good piece. Also by is it Richard or Roger Kioski? I'm getting the first name wrong. Cash Flow Quadrant. And those 3 books will give you ideas of why and how. Now, if you're looking at property management or rental properties in your state, look for tenant advocacy handouts or books. In the state of Vermont, there's a great book called Renting in Vermont, put out by Legal Aid. It summarizes the rules and the regulations. Also, find out if your state requires that property management be licensed. New Hampshire, it does. In Vermont, it doesn't. And if anybody wants, I'm more than happy to make some time to have some one-on-one conversations with you guys. My email is barmstrong@kw.com, barmstrong@kw.com. And let me see if I can add this in. Why is it? There we go, everyone. In fact, I'm going to put a second email in there, and that's my assistant. She may grab me by the ear and make sure I actually get back to you a little bit more quickly. Okay. All right, well, let's rock and roll. And again, guys, interrupt, ask questions. And if you put something in the chat, I don't respond, just unmute and speak up. And I say that so we actually have a great night and grow together and hopefully laugh a little bit as well. So again, section 18, negotiating offers, my favorite session. So this is going to sound a little pontifical. For a guy who didn't go to college, got in a little trouble after high school, used to have mohawks, Liberty spikes, and even dreadlocks at one point. I made a commitment when I started to do relatively well in real estate to go really study the art of communication. In my argument, and this is going to sound a little preachy, is that I know hundreds of agents who study rules and regulations. They study, pricing. They study how to do multifamilies, how to do buyer presentations, but they don't study or practice communication. So if I had one big, huge thing to pass on before I kick myself in the butt and get going so we don't run late, fall in love and study the art of communication and understand personality profiles. So hopefully you guys will take some notes. Here are 3 or 4 of my favorite books. And if you're on my last session, I probably said these already. 1, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss is a former international lead FBI hostage negotiator. It's a great book to listen to because the first half of each chapter is a real life hostage situation. They break down their tactics. The second part of the chapter is his consultation. Chris Voss, my goal is to get through that book 10 times. I've done it 6. The next book, and side note, these aren't going to all be books that you're going to love listening to, but I don't love going to the gym at 6 in the morning with my wife and the trainer. I just know it's something that's really good for me. So I go. Second book, Fierce Conversations by Dr. Suzanne Scott. I'm certified. Can I please rate the name of the books? Svetlana, you are testing me tonight to multitask, type in the chat, all this stuff. So thank you, and we'll keep doing it. Chris Voss, and I meant that as a compliment. Hopefully you took that. Never Split the Difference. And then Dr. Suzanne, I think it's with a Z, Scott, Fierce Conversations. I'm certified to teach the course behind that book. I've probably listened to Fierce Conversations 7 or 8 times, including once to have a powerful conversation with a business partner. That was a 4.5-hour listen for one conversation. Also, Charles Duhigg, Super Communicators. I think I spelled his name wrong. And I can't type and talk at the same time. There's another book, and this one I can't remember the exact title. I'll check my Audible, and then we got to definitely want to make sure I get going for you guys. How to Say Impossible to, I think it's How to Talk to Anyone is a really good one. Hang on a second.
Was it How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Rena, that's actually a great one as well with negotiations. So yes, Rena added one. That one I listened to a bunch. How to Win Friends and Influence, that one's huge. Here's the last one, and then I'm going to kick myself in the butt and get going because I want to make sure I get you guys out on time out of respect to your family. How to Say Anything. And so again, guys, encouraging, dive into these books, listen to them, make a goal. It makes a huge difference. All right. And thank you very much for letting me ramble a little bit, and let's get going. All right. So warning, telemarketing must comply with TCPA, respect your do not call list, watch robo-dialers, watch those services that make the calls for you because they will not necessarily protect you from liability. All right. And while General Keller Williams provides this information and prepare the materials, carefully to guarantee the outcomes or the information necessarily contained within. And let's see here. All right. Copyright. We'll go through that. All right. So today we're on, if I'm moving my mouse not too fast, today we're covering negotiations. Again, one of my favorite topics. I want to encourage everybody to interrupt, ask questions to make this a great event for everybody. So to me, negotiation is, is an art. It is absolutely an art, and you've got to have passion to it. Side note, one of the most powerful tactics in negotiations is listening. If you're familiar with the DISC personality profile, and if you're not, definitely research it. I'm a high D with a very high I, really driven, and I talk way too much. So me remembering to cork it and use my ears proportionate to my number of mouths that I have, one, is a challenge for me. But the number one tactic in negotiation, most effective, is active listening. 3 P's of negotiation. Prepare, present, and position. Sun Tzu, Art of War, which is a 2,000-year-old book that has been used throughout Eastern, philosophy as well as Western, now applied to business. Sun Tzu has a quote that says something to the effect of, the supreme warrior wins first and then goes to battle. The defeated warrior goes to battle and tries to win. So as you're preparing negotiations, revisit your client's goals, understand what they're at, the ramifications if they don't, so forth and so on. We're going to hopefully share some negotiation tips. I think I just did right there. We'll go through recaps and ahas, as well as get into the daily success system. Negotiating is not something to be avoided or feared. It's an everyday part of life. Anybody disagree? Okay.
No, because my daughter does that every day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So anybody have any limiting beliefs about good negotiations or their ability to negotiate? Let me ask you this. If you sell a $500,000 house tomorrow, and let's say that you collected, for hypothetical situations, $15,000, do you all feel you're worth it? Love the head shakes. If you paused for a second, first, that's okay. Secondly, it's understandable. Third, attack that hesitation. I don't know about you guys. I feel guilty sometimes on the easy ones where everything goes smoothly. We get an offer accepted easy. I only showed them 4 or 5 homes versus the deals where I had to show them 40 homes, or I had to sell a house 4 times to get it to a closing one time. So actually keep rocking and rolling here. All right. Negotiations and the Y4C2Ts. Now, negotiation is definitely a bargaining. It's a give and take process between 2 or more participants. Each has its own aims, needs, viewpoints, and everyone involved is, seeking some common ground. Negotiations is where, one of our Y4C2Ts comes into play in a big fashion. Anybody care to guess which Y4C2Ts comes into place?
At the offer
Say it
negotiation?
again, Elizabeth?
During the offer negotiation?
Yeah, to me, one of the things that comes to mind from the Y4Cs is win-win or no deal. I'd also say integrity, do the right thing. Customers always come first. So a couple thoughts on that. A phrase that I'll use with a challenging client is we are at times, but our clients' humble servants. And that's usually me hinting to another agent, I've got a challenging client and I'm doing their bidding. But to me, win-win deals is exceptional because this is off what they tell me to say. I personally believe that every deal has a rubber grommet of negotiations. You guys remember those grommets we used to use in 8th grade science class with the beakers? A grommet has a push and a pull. It's rubber. And over time, what happens if it's pushed and pulled too much? gets dry, it gets brittle, and it cracks. And so I always encourage our agents, be careful to, not over negotiate too hard, because if you really waste that energy of that grommet in the beginning, you might get to the day before closing and need a solid from the other side, and there won't be any good faith left. Make sense?
So are you saying basically don't push the other agent, to their breaking point?
Ben,
before
that's
the
a good way of
deal goes
looking at
through?
it. Yeah. Put it this way. You don't want to basically exhaust every bit of effort in negotiations, to me, on the first one. And if your client's telling you, go after this, go after that, go after that, if that's what they really want, you're going to do it. But I would challenge a client. If a client was asking me to be a little bit almost cutthroat, say it was you, Ben. I'd say, Ben, I can absolutely do that. And if you want me to do that, I will go ahead and make that request. Do you know what my concern is? We may have an unexpected issue a week before closing, and we may need their help. And if you were the buyer after I executed your request to do Y, how would you feel? What would you tell me to do?
You're saying if you're pushing back, are you saying you tell that to the client that's asking you to do a little bit sort of too much
if
too
clients
fast?
asking me to be cutthroat, I'll
Uh-huh.
encourage them to think about the long game, to leave
Right.
some
Okay.
goodwill in reserves.
Gotcha.
Now, at the end of the day, if they tell me to do it, then they're my client, I got to do it. But you guys are going to get sick of my quotes. There's an old Vermont quote: pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. Alan, did you have a comment?
No, just sorry. I just clicked it accidentally, but excellent information. Yeah.
All right. Now I just screwed up there I go. Lost you guys again. You guys are saints for putting up with this. There we go. Participants. All right. Rena, go for it.
Yeah, I kind of have an example of what you were just talking about. When I purchased my home, I had asked my real estate agent, could she find out about like seller concessions and maybe the seller can give me cash toward the closing. And she's like, with the way the market was, she's like, we're not going to put that with our initial offer. And we didn't. And then when it came down to closing, the seller wanted to close a bit early, and that's when she negotiated for them to pay some of the closing costs, and it worked. So it was a win-win.
Yeah, great story. Great story. Chris, I think it was Chris Voss who talked about that or maybe it was Great to Good by Jim Collins. They talk about a pile of gunpowder. If there's two 1800 warships in the ocean, and then all of a sudden you're getting close and you just launch all your cannonballs, you might waste all your gunpowder while you're calibrating your aim. So you want to reserve some gunpowder for later in the transaction. So I'm going to force myself to do what is not my strength. Get back to the PowerPoint. Hang on a second. So path of negotiation, pretty simple. Number one, make an offer. It's accepted. You go ahead to close. Side note, the easy ones are the ones that get me spooked, because then I'm waiting for something to happen. Option two, put an offer out. It's either rejection or countered. Negotiations begin. And then next round of negotiations, again, it's accepted or rejected. Side note, anybody have any buyers that ever get afraid when you find the house that they're looking for, and then all of a sudden they go quiet on you and they freak out and they go silent? One of the things in negotiation tactics, you're going to negotiate both with the other agent as well as with your own client. And if you've got buyers that are nervous, oftentimes first-time home buyers, and hang on a second, got an issue with my tech. There we go. First-time home buyers, a great phrase is, hey, Rena, you seem to really like the house. You want to put some thoughts on paper? Because when you think of, if you're a brand new home buyer, especially if you're an S or a C, S is relationship based, they're cautious individuals. When they think of writing an offer, they think of, oh my God, I'm making a 30-year decision. I'm making a 6-digit decision. And they almost start to hyperventilate. In reality, what is an offer but some thoughts on paper? So a little bit of a story. First amazing wife, rest her soul. We worked very closely together. She was a relocation director. I was a firm manager. Then we were on the same team together. Best of the times, most challenging at times. She had some high-ass buyers. They wanted to see a property for a second time while she was away. I go to show them the property, and they said, hey, we really, really like this. And I said, well, I'm around all weekend. If you want to put some thoughts on paper and see what the seller says, let me know. So my wife gets back into town. She was a Long Island girl raised by a Marine. Calls him up and said, Brian said you really liked that. You had a great second showing. Do you want to write an offer? And they said, well, Brian said we could put some thoughts on paper. And she's like, yeah, that's an offer. So keep in mind, you got to negotiate with your client as much as you've got to negotiate with the other side. And one of the things, and this is just all stream of consciousness and heart, it's not what KW is telling me to say, is one of the things we have to negotiate with buyers in a tight market. I think I pronounced your name incorrectly. You asked questions earlier. Is we may have buyers in a seller's market try to go way under asking and just keep negotiating themselves out of a transaction. So if you've got buyers in a multiple offer situation, you've got to negotiate with them. And a great question to ask the buyers, Drew, at what price do you feel comfortable seeing someone else's car in the driveway? Well, so if it was $400,000 house, you might be like, well, 450. So at 445, you're at peace with it. You'd be upset. And then he was maybe if it's 450, he's maybe, let's go in at 430. Keep asking those questions, not to get the offer accepted because, you want to get it accepted, but you want to do the right thing to your buyers, but to make them think. So a lot of buyers think they'll have opportunity to counter, and they don't always have the opportunity to counter. Side note, and this is a little preachy, if you have realtor events, get to them in your area. Anybody care to guess why I would encourage you to go to realtor events and network with other agents?
Having good rapport with the agents is going to help you out in any negotiation.
Absolutely. Hey, Alan, it was great to see you the other night. It was a great time at the golf club. Hey, I know we haven't done a deal in forever today, but man, I'd love to be able to get one on it. Hey, tell you what, if we get this accepted, I'll take you golfing when we get this done. Schmooze, get to know them, ask how their kids are. And who would you guys rather deal with as a listing agent? An agent you've never talked to and you don't know, or somebody that you really get along with?
Definitely.
All right. Keep moving right along, and one of these days I'll learn all my tech. All right. Why is this not going? There we go.
Quick question.
Please.
So say you have a buyer, and they do want to kind of lowball, like, is there you're kind of doing their bidding, of course, anyway, but, if you think that it's going to kind of seem as like way too low, do you tell them, like, is there a way you tell them, like, hey, that's too low? And, do you kind of have like a certain cutoff, like 10 or 20% below that you kind of say below that it's going to seem insulting or something?
So let me work backwards. I don't have a cutoff in the sense that if they're a buyer client of mine and they give me a lawful order, present an offer of $100,000 on a $200,000 house, it's a lawful order. Now, I might ask if they keep doing, and I'm exaggerating to drive the point home, but if they keep doing that, Ben, I might ask to recalibrate the relationship and the expectations of the marketplace. Occasionally, I might ask to be released. Don't rush to do that. But then I'll go to your first point's comment, and feel free, realistically role play with me for a second, Ben. So Ben, hey, I can absolutely appreciate that. The house, and I'm going to make this up a little bit for time. Respecting the house has been on the market only 7 days. If you were the seller in a market as tight as ours, what would you think about an offer that's 10% below the market? How would you respond?
Oh, I would consider it.
You consider it? Well, hey, I can absolutely appreciate that. Right now, when I look at the market, I'm seeing the average home in the the greater blank area selling at 103% of asking price. If you were seeing your neighbors' homes go for 103% for asking price, would you still accept 90% of the asking price?
Well, maybe the seller doesn't really know what the market's like.
Now, pause for time, and these are good comebacks. So, what I would do in that situation is keep asking some questions, hopefully leading you to the better conclusion. And here's a key thing. I would do what's called a zoom out to zoom in. Now, because we don't know the real situation in your head and my head, I'll give you an example. Zoom out. If you said you had to be in a certain specific school district because you had a special needs kid that had the school program and we had to be in it in 30 days, or you weren't going to make the deadline, I might say, hey, Ben, help me understand. If I understand you and your wife correctly, we've got to be into this neighborhood by blank date to make the school cutoff. What's more important than you? Saving a few dollars on your house or getting your son into the district that they need to be in and having a happy wife?
Well, when you put it that way.
Yeah. Now, side note, real story from 2 weeks ago. And side note, guys, I'm going to ask you for candor. If you need to keep moving me, tell me to move up. If I'm doing a good job, let me know if I'm bringing value, because I'm not going through everything that KW tells me to say, because I've been doing it for 30 years and want to bring passion to it. KW has great stuff. I just like to add to it. So I had a close friend, an agent of ours, fall into serious health positions. Side note, tell your MCA I said this, get everything into command, because we had an agent who had meningitis, health issues, and we could not find all his clients because he didn't put them in command. But I stepped into negotiated transaction on an under contract with him. And I did what is very natural. We had the seller. There was a buyer concession request. And I started to focus on the concession request, the question of the inspections. Was it valid? Was it not valid? And I caught myself not doing a zoom in or zoom out to zoom in. So I said to the client, I apologize. I didn't ask you a very key question. We just got to know each other because, again, the medical situation, the agent. Why are you selling this house? What's important to you about it? Well, I'm out of state. All my cash is tied up in that house, and I really, really need this to go through. So I asked the person, I think we can negotiate a little bit, but keep in mind the moment that buyer says, nah, I'm all set, they may have jumped the hook permanently. And what's more important to you? Getting this across at perhaps 10 grand less than you originally hoped, or saving the 10 grand? And they said, Brian, tell them we'll do the concession. So the tactic, zoom out, look at all their goals, and then you can zoom into the situation to choose the best tactic to win in a dance. So keep asking questions, and Ben, thank you very much for that. Common points in negotiations. Price, usually the primary factor. Cost of the property. Side note, I'm a firm believer if you have cash, you can often talk price. If you don't have cash and it's a balanced market, you're talking terms. So terms, either financial, time-based, or both. Now, when you think of additional terms to negotiate other than price, what comes to mind for you guys in your experiences? Bruce.
Rate buy down.
Rate buy down. Great one. What's another one?
Closing costs, and closing date.
Beautiful. Elizabeth, thank you very much. Quick story on that one. My very first home, this is going back, 25 years ago. We beat out another offer that was $2,000 more because we would close 2 weeks later and the seller didn't have to move get their kids into a house before school closed. So I encourage you to take this note, and whoever asked me to type earlier, my multitasking is not that good, so I'm going to save you the pain. And I encourage you guys, take this note. Call up the listing agent. Hey, Ben, calling about 123 Smith Street. I've got some buyers that are, thinking about making an offer. Here's the line. Other than the almighty dollar, what can we do to make your seller smile? Now, what I'm looking for in that case, is there a closing date? Is there, yeah, they're going to tell me, sometimes they'll say it's all about the dollar. Is there a closing date? If I was selling a lakefront camp on Lake Champlain, as a listing agent, maybe Rena might say, well, Brian, I know you've been in your family for 30 years. My buyers would like to offer you a weekend a year to stay at your camp for the next 5 years. Any other ideas, closing dates, closing costs, concessions that come to mind that we can negotiate? So comment, if you're dealing with investment properties, one of my favorite types of properties. Side note, I think one of the best source for listings right now is call for rent ads. I got 5 deals out of it, 1 for rent ad call. So with investment properties, never underestimate seeing if the seller will offer financing. A lot of times they won't. And side note, if you're going to make a play on an investment property as a purchaser to see if they'll do some portion of owner financing, I would draft up a rough amortization schedule so that the seller can see how much money they'll make from the bank. The other thing with a seller investment, and remember, I'm not a tax advisor, is that if I sell you guys a property and I hold the paper on it, there's certain circumstances the IRS will look at it as an installment sale. So it may help mitigate some of my capital gains. All right, let me keep moving right along. All right, ahas, agent helping agents. Let's hear 3 to 5 ahas so far, or if I'm just bloviating, you guys gotta let me know. All right, Alan, marry the house, date the rate. Let's hear a few more.
You negotiate with both your clients and the agent on the other side.
Spot on. Spot on. Side note, Drew, let me ask you a question. When do you think that negotiating with your client should begin?
Day one.
Great answer. No, great answer. I would consider in your buyer consults talking about average list to sell price ratios, how many offers you're seeing on properties, and let them know what you're generally see to make winning offers. So that, Drew, if you and your significant other were like getting advice from your father who's buying in a super rough market, I can educate you day one that your dad may love you and care for you, but would you agree that blank market might be different than the market we're operating in, and help begin to negotiate to help you get to a range that's going to get the offer accepted. Svetlana, thank you very much for sharing today as well. Networking with other agents can help with negotiations. That is a huge one. That is a huge one. All right, let's hear one more.
About putting your thoughts on paper.
Yep, huge. Putting thoughts on paper, because you guys and I, we deal with this all the time. But again, remember that first, if you own your house, that first house, how nerve-wracking it was. My second house, I was still nervous twit. All right, let me get back to this. All right. So the 3 P's of negotiations. And side note, the next couple pages, they'll say, read an article out of your participation guide. I could not find that, my participation guide. So we're just gonna, we're gonna keep going on that one. So negotiate a skill that anyone can learn and be perfected with experience. The best practice you can follow is certainly the 3 P's: prepare, present, and position. Preparation is key in building confidence and ensuing. What comes to mind is a couple things that you can do to prepare for negotiations. Hint, I gave you one already. Zoom out to zoom in. Why is your buyer or seller selling this house? Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. It's Zoom automated. What's important to them? What's their risk if they don't achieve their objective by blank? How long have they been looking, or how long have they been trying to sell the home? I would also take a look at the property. Has the property been on the market a long time? What do you know of the agent? Vermont's a much smaller market, so I know a lot of the agents our agents deal with. And do you know, are they a good negotiator? Are they not a good negotiator? Are they a hothead? Are they not a hothead? What do you know about the agent and their abilities? Possibly, what do you even know about their agent and their family? Prepare. I would also, find out what you can find out about the seller. Now, what I'm about to say may be controversial. I would encourage you to ask questions you would never answer. I would encourage you to ask questions you would never answer. Alan, hey, if you don't mind me asking, why is your seller selling? And he might just tell, if he starts going, I might just say, yeah, tell me more. Oh yeah, really interesting, about that. I remember one great agent, no longer in our area. I was talking with him, and I did it on purpose. Got it talking about this, talking about that, possible things. Got him really comfortable. And I said, hey, Bill, I forgot to ask you, why is your seller selling? Oh, Brian, I can't tell you that. That was a great answer. A week into the contract, I found the sellers were getting divorced. That agent did a great job negotiating with me. All right, present. Move into the negotiation process by presenting your offer. So I'll give you a couple mistakes don't do. I don't know if you use DocuSign or dotloop in your area. We use both, but most of our agents use dotloop. Do not just send an offer over electronically and assume the agent got it. I was at family reunion one time and I got a text. Wow, the offer was that insulting? No counter offer? And I'm like, what do you mean? They had dot-looped me an offer. My phone notifications with dot-loop don't work. They never texted me, hey, Brian, I just sent you an offer. Would love to talk to you about it. So not every agent's going to give you the time to talk with them and butter them up. But if you're presenting an offer, hey, Splitlania, I'm going to be sending an offer in the next hour. When would be maybe time we could have 15, 20 minutes to talk about it? So present, move in negotiation position, move both parties closer. We'll keep going on that one. So prepare, know your goals. I think I said this already. Know your client, think ahead, set clear expectations. Drew, back to that comment at the beginning and day one. If you're buying in South Burlington, Vermont, and it was sub 500, it's probably right now going at 101% of asking price. So I might say to you, hey, Drew, remember that we talked about how important it was for you to be in South Burlington? Just want to remind you, before we put some thoughts on paper, again, before we put thoughts on paper, the average house in South Burlington is selling at 101% of asking price. So as we start to go through your offer, I want you to be prepared to make an offer that's going to make the seller smile so we can make you and your spouse smile. Set clear expectations. To me, that's whether or not I know there's multiple offers. Side note, that's also a great question to ask the other agent. Some will tell you, some will not. Most will. Set clear expectations with your buyer if you're presenting the buyer. Don't expect, Drew, I'm just going to run with you for a second. Drew, don't expect the seller is going to necessarily give us a chance to counter. That's if it's a multiple offer situation. Go ahead, Drew.
Just a second ago, you said make sure to ask the other agent that question, and I missed the question.
Oh, if they have any other offers.
Oh, got it. All right.
Yeah, like in a great side note, little suggestion for you guys to do is take some notes either on some phrases that I use, but think of common list of questions to ask the listing agent. Hey, Drew, other than the almighty dollar, what can we do to make your seller smile? If there was an ideal closing date, what would it be? Is there anything that you could tell me about your seller that would make sure that we respect them through the process of writing an offer? And side note, guys, that can be emotional stuff to properties. They don't want to take something to it, stuff like that. Definitely ask them if they have other offers. And if you're being told that your offer isn't the strongest one, don't hesitate to ask again. Hey, Drew, I can absolutely appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that with me. Where would I have to come in to be the best offer? Now, they might say that I can't tell you that. And I would just reply, Drew, I politely disagree. I'm just trying to make your seller smile. So if there's a number that can make your seller smile, make my client smile at the same time, I'd love to know what that is. Rena.
Yes, this conversation that you're speaking of now, is this something that you would call before you present the offer or after you present your offer? Like, could you call and like touch base with them and fill it out first before you present?
I would do that when it's possible. And the problem with our discussions tonight is we all have different situations ahead. So Rena, to paint that, and thank you for the question. If this was a situation that been on the market 2 or 3 days, you told me let's paint it even more. It's Friday, they're not going to accept offers till Monday. I would use the time to schmooze the agent and collect information. Now, if I just met Drew and an hour ago, and this is our first house and it's the house of his dreams, and you were the listing agent and said, Brian, it's 2:00, we're accepting offers till 4, you may not have that opportunity. But whenever possible, ask those questions. Does that help, Rena? Excellent. Diana.
So I had a listing and I had 7 offers, and I'll never forget. And this was a friend of mine before I got into real estate. And she said to me, is my offer, are we up at bat or are we way out in left field? And I was like, I had to take a minute and step back. Like, is she even allowed to ask this question? And I'll never forget. I was just like, oh, you're in the game. And that was it. And I'm like, I'm not going to real estate jail.
So one is, appreciate you sharing that. And, if your broker tells you you're not supposed to ask certain questions, follow your broker. My 2 cents is we can ask a lot more questions than we realize that we can. Just again, we may not want to answer those same very questions. But I wouldn't hesitate to say, like if you were the listing agent, you said, and I said, hey, Diana, are we warm? We cold? We smoking hot? Help me out. Yeah, Brian, you're a little lukewarm. Well, if we were to see a number around X, would we be warm at that point or would we be hot? Oh, Brian, you'd be getting pretty damn warm at that point. And I would probably use those. Then I would share them with my buyer. Hey, Drew, they're not giving me specific information, but what they told me right now is we're not even in bathwater yet, and try to handle that. Side note, this is an Armstrong original. If you're at a multiple offer situation and you're playing poker blind, be candid with your people. Hey, Brett, I just want to let you know, we're at a proverbial poker table in Las Vegas, and you're relying on me because in my case, I've been in the industry for 30 years and I've got a pretty successful track record of gambling. But with candor, right now, these are your poker chips. And based upon the information given me by the listing agent, I can't really tell if we're really close or we're not. So I'm just going to ask you to make the best bet that you have and ask you, at what price do you feel comfortable seeing another person's car in that driveway? And let's just play that card and hope for the best. Be honest, be candid, be authentic. Make sense? And side note, one of the things that's a key piece on here, know your client well. Back to the DISC personality profile. The D's are going to be, and the I's are going to be fine with taking a lot of risk. S's and C's are going to be a little bit more cautious. And so they're going to have, what do you mean I have to go over asking price? That's the asking price. I don't go to a store and pay an extra $20 for lobster. It's be prepared for that. That's why, Drew, you nailed it. And I think I saw Slavani. Do you have a question or? Nope. Okay. All right. So know your client. Also, again, know the other agent. Set clear expectations. Prior to meeting with the other party, again, set clear and realistic expectations. What you're seeing for list to sell price ratios, how many offers do you know on the property, you know, their financing compared to what the property is, i.e. if they're looking at a fixer-upper and they're using a standard FHA as opposed to an FHA 203K, be, you know, cognizant of that and let them know. Same thing with foreclosures and short sales. You know, let the buyers or the sellers know what the expectation is of the process. Side note, we haven't had to deal with a lot of short sales recently, although I think it might be coming back a little bit. If I had a hesitant buyer when they were looking at short sales, I'd say, you know, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I can understand you want to look at short sales, but if you're okay putting your crash helmet on and a 5-point seatbelt and spending 2 to 3 months to see if Bank of America takes your offer, let's go look at some short sales. If that's not the process that you want, then I'm going to suggest, as tempting as they are, we look for your everyday buyer, or excuse me, everyday seller who is not financially in duress. All right. Before making a counteroffer, it's good practice to speak, you know, with a couple other agents, especially if you're newer. You know, don't hesitate to ask for advice on that. Also, use a lot of open-ended questions and active listening with the listing agent as well as with your clients. Does everybody know the difference between an open-ended question and a closed question? We may get to this in just a little bit.
Open-ended is something you can't answer yes or no.
Bingo. And there's times to use both. So certainly obey the laws. Every state and local, you know, locality has their own set of laws and regulate zoning. Give you an example. Vermont has a common ownership interest addendum, and that basically says if you're buying into a condominium, you by law get the documents and the financials and have 5 days from the date of receipt to review them and terminate. I had a lot of agents recently ask me that we're working with buyers, can we waive that right? In Vermont, you cannot. So know your rules and regulations. You know, also, if you're writing offers on multifamilies and you're expecting your as a primary resident, your client, you know, is going to move into one of them, be aware of what type of notice the seller has to give, you know, what type of rights the buyers or the tenants may have so that you can properly prepare your buyers for expectations as well as your sellers. You know, also know the documents inside and out. My recommendation to you guys, know each one of your paragraphs so well that you can summarize it very quickly. Section 1 equals blah, blah, blah. Section 2 says that we can do X. Section 3 says we can do Y. You know, because with humor, you don't want somebody to have to read the entire contract. The other thing is you don't want to ever hear a buyer say, well, I didn't know what I was signing. Great thing back to you, Drew, for offering that in the beginning of the consult. Doesn't hurt if you get a serious buyer to actually go through a purchase and sales and agreement. And side note, one little thing that I used to do when I was more front lines, when I started to talk with a buyer about writing an offer, I'd say, hey, Ben, one of the probably most important things you're going to want to decide is what price we put in the offer. We've got a lot of documents to go through as we draft your offer. So I'm going to ask you to think about the price you want to make for an offer on this house. And if it was a hot market, I'd say, I want you to think about the price just below what you're comfortable seeing another person's car in the driveway. And then let's go through the rest of the contract and we'll come back to the price last. Does that make sense? That was a way to save me time because I know we could spend an hour on price. All right. And ask purposeful questions. Provide points, you'll negotiation. Provides insight on where you and your clients have leverage. Strong buyer, paying cash. You know, you don't have to sell a house in order to buy a house. You know, it allows you to get to know your clients, their goal. Sorry, this is probably repeating a little bit. Helps you learn what will make win-win negotiations for both parties. All right, let me move my Zoom screen just a little bit. All right, hang on just a second. So open versus closed questions. Open-ended questions, you know, questions have unlimited responses. Mr. and Mrs. Listing Agent, what haven't I asked you that I should ask you that would help our offer be accepted? What's important about closing in 30 days? They'll give you an answer. Try to go 3 to 5 deep on a lot of these questions. What's important to your seller about closing in 30 days? What happens if they aren't able to close in 30 days? Tell me more about that. And a great question, how do you feel about that? There's times to use open-ended questions. There's times to use closed-ended questions. So closed-ended questions that expect specific responses, simple yes, no, one word. Do you have to sell your home by a specific date? Do you have any other offers? If they'd ask, they say yes, I'd say how many? And can you tell me, are you pleased with the other offers so far? Are they strong? Again, ask questions that you may not answer. Side note, I believe most of the time, if you represent a seller, it's better for your seller to disclose multiple offers. At the same time, if it's a buyer's market, and Svetlana, I think you were asking me about buyer's market, or was it Elizabeth earlier? Keep in mind, in a buyer's market, buyers might not want to compete with other buyers. Anybody ever have that happen? I represented a seller one time, and I had an offer in hand. I knew this agent who brought me the second offer. Shoot, now I'm actually forgetting his name. It's been a long time ago. And I said, hey, so-and-so, are your buyers the type of buyers, if they're in a multiple offer situation, they would jump the hook and just walk? And he goes, yes. So I asked my client if they wanted me to disclose. We had multiple offers, and my advice to them was do not. Anybody question me in that situation? Again, one of the things I love about negotiation is you can have a lot of form. You can also be very formless. So closed-ended questions, specific example, there's some great things that can get you very specific answers. Anybody have any examples of open-ended questions they've used or closed-ended questions that have helped them in negotiation? Here's a suggestion for you too, with for sale by owners, and they're unrepresented sellers, I would ask them even more questions. The other thing I would encourage you to do with for sale by owners, and this is presenting an offer, and this is not on the PowerPoint anywhere, start with the net number after your commission. Anybody care to guess why I say that? Ben,
Because
your
that-
brow is... Go ahead, Alan.
I was just going to say, because they probably have a number in their head of what they want to walk away with. So if you're giving them that number, that's what they want, really, ultimately. They want to know what they're walking away with.
Yeah, because if I said, hey, I've got an offer for you for $515,000, my commission's 15 grand, what do you think they're going to want for a number? 515.
Yeah.
Alan, my buyers have presented you an offer that will net you $500,000. Little bit semantics, but my goal is that first number in their head blazes is that first number, and that's the one I want to work on. I'm not going to say it works all the time, but it works plenty for me.
And when you say net, are you just subtracting commissions and fees?
Yeah, and actually, Ben, thank you very much for that. When I said net in that case, I just meant after my buyer agent commission.
Okay.
Net is an interesting topic right now in Vermont. They're talking about changing their forms to whether or not, so the seller can check, is it paid on purchase price or net? Now they're spelling out what net means, which is just, sorry, text came across my screen, just buyer's commission. I do not like the word net in most cases because, Ben, you might be like, well, net, I thought that was after my mortgage. I'm exaggerating to drive the point home. Side note, another negotiation tactic, if you're either presenting, and I'm thinking as a buyer, as agent presenting an offer and you're putting your commission in, and the agent keeps coming back from the other side and trying to negotiate your commission downwards, here's a solid approach. Hey, Ben, I can absolutely appreciate the counter, and I'm grateful to be negotiating with this and looking forward to hopefully getting this done with you. My client has made a decision to hire me for blank dollars, and they have requested that the commission be structured in the transaction. So could you do me a favor? Help me help you. Any counter that you provide me, assume that there's going to be a commission of blank number of apples. And side note, I think within Keller Williams, we can talk commissions, but commissions are very wildly negotiable. We have to respect that. Side note, another negotiation tactics. We are seeing some buyers right now offer to pay their commissions outside. At the same time, we've seen, the commission compression, we haven't seen a wild amount, but don't just assume if the seller is only offering blank that they will not pay more than blank. Does that make sense? I've seen some agents say, oh, the seller's not offering anything on that. Yeah, I guess I can't show it. That's an awesome opportunity because the seller may not want to offer anything, but if there are other buyers wrongfully are ignoring it or other agents are, that means less buyers for Brian to compete with.
Well, and if they have a decent agent, they're going to negotiate with the seller on our behalf, right? To say, well, hey, you're still going to net this amount, etc.
Yeah, and you're spot on. And Drew, with humor, if you were a seller didn't want to pay something, I'd say, well, and let's say, and this is Brian's personal comment, the next one. Check with your broker before it. I firmly believe that, and I think Bill Weidecker is a great OP. I don't know if we have any of his agents, I think the world of Bill. But Bill used the phrase that offering compensation to a buyer is like financial curb appeal. So what I've instructed our agents is first and foremost, I believe in the value of offering compensation. It's financial curb appeal. Talk with your sellers about it, negotiate with them, promote that it's going to help them optimize more dollars by making it easier for buyers to work with them. But at the same time, Drew, if you were in a hot zip code in Vermont and you had to sell, you needed to sell, and you absolutely refused to offer compensation, I would still take your listing right now. I would take it. Side note, I prefer the phrase professional fee or compensation over the word commission. But if you were that seller, I would say, hey, Ben, or excuse me, Drew, I'd be happy to take that, but just be prepared. We may have a great problem. What do you mean? We may have a buyer that includes it in the offer of the contract, and all I'm going to suggest is that we deal with that when it comes up. All right, so ask what and why questions. What would happen if helps you anticipate X? Why is that important to you? Why is that important to your seller? If you had a buyer who said, I really want the snowblower, how important that is to you? Would you be at peace if you had to go buy one after the closing? Including if sellers want to take stuff. So let's keep rock and rolling here. So that scenario I couldn't find, so we're just going to keep rock and rolling. Pause and candor is encouraged. Are you guys finding value in our discussions tonight?
Yes.
All right. Feel free to tell me no. I got a thick skin. I've been in this industry for 30 years.
Where do
All
we
right.
get a book of all your quotes?
So side note, at my market center meeting, they started, my nickname's Panda. That's another story. And I got pandas all in my office. They started doing Panda Bingo, how many quotes I would share at a market center meeting. And they tried to do it without telling me. And I sort of figured out, I think 15 minutes before. But reason why I use a lot of quotes is they help me do two things. That helps me learn the lesson, and I find it helps others learn it too. So, all right, and we got 7:11 is the time, so let me make sure I keep rock and rolling. Best practices, when presenting offers. Again, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Call the other agent. Hey, Rena, I'm going to be sending you an offer over at X. I was wondering if we could get 10, 15 minutes just to discuss it. Pay attention to nonverbal cues like pauses and voice qualities. Hey, I just sent you. Yeah, I just saw it. You might be like, they're not impressed with it. Keep quiet once you present the offer. It's one of my biggest weaknesses. Side note, one of my other favorite quotes, Alan, is I've discovered the enemy. It is us. So yet I digress. Listen carefully to what's important to the other party. So before we get done, and I know we should be able to do this, I want to just rip through some tactics for you guys. But the tactic I'll cover right now, and I think I said this last time, looping. Does anybody know what looping is? So let's say Veronica tells me her sellers are really concerned about, about getting out of the home by XYZ because they want to be in, Florida by the time their grandson is born. And they had a really bad experience with Brand X mortgage product. Hey, Veronica, I can absolutely appreciate that. If what I heard correctly was really what's most important to your seller is get them down to, Florida before the snow flies. And I think you said before December when their grandson's born. Anything and I know you have some questions about the FHA 203K. Anything else, anything I missed? Now I'm doing that for two reasons. One of the biggest human desires is to be heard and understood. And I wanted that hypothetical and Veronica to feel like she was heard and understood. The second thing is I'm looking for, did I miss something? Is there anything else? So that probably the toughest one for all of us is stay calm and relax. You might get a listing agent calls you up and just says, Bruce, what the hell were you thinking? The house was listed for 500. This is XYZ zip code. You're bringing me 475? I mean, what are you smoking your breakfast? Brian, I'm sorry, Brian, I might reply, I'm sorry that you're less than enthused with our offer. I would hopefully see it as you got a great problem. You got a buyer who wants to buy your house. I hope you'd be pissed at all the other buyers who went through the house and didn't make an offer. And then ask a question. What would you rather have? No offers or an offer because somebody wants to buy your house? That might be a rough example. And side note, you can't take the stuff. It's brutally hard to do. You can't take it personally. I had a discount broker on a post-closing issue tell me recently, blasted me in an email or text. I kept saying, hey, I don't want to deal with this over text. I prefer to talk with you. And the guy said to me, well, I only made $3,500 on the deal, so I don't know. I said, sir, I appreciate that's where you set your value. Your fee has nothing to do with the issue. Now I was calm. I'm sure that one riled him a little bit. But stay calm and stay relaxed. Side note, you remember we've got to negotiate with two parties, your client and the other side. So if Alan told me to tell Rena to go blank, 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 blank on her offer, I'm not going to say, hey, my seller told you to go blank, 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 blank. I'm going to say, Rena, my seller was less than enthralled with your offer. Does anybody know the definition of a diplomat? And Alan, yes, this is another one. Definition of a diplomat is the person who can say the nastiest of things in the nicest of ways. Focus, I can't stress enough, and I hope you sense my sincerity. If you understand the rules and the regulations, you understand the processes, but you don't dive into the art of communication, you may be one of the most capable people out there, but you'll miss it on the communication. Focus on the customer's needs. Find out. Side note, back to that discount gentleman that I was dealing with. I knew, based upon how he runs his model, and unfortunately due to a personal matter that was going on in his life, his issue was time. So when I asked for $1,500 of his $3,500 back for a concession after closing, My tactical advantage was he didn't have time. And I politely said to him, hey, I'm at peace with whatever you decide to do on this one. I will tell you, I think this number, it's going to get you out of this situation a lot quicker. My client is a very nice, reasonable, but tenacious and strong-willed person. Then I got a text telling me basically how they didn't screw up, but they'll send a check. So focus on the customer's need. Give your offer the best chance. This is not in the slides, but let's ask a couple questions. The home was on the market 24 hours. You want to write an offer in the first day? What are you going to give for an acceptance period? And this is a wide open answer.
24 hours.
24 hours? All right, let's hear two more.
I don't
What
know.
other tactics might you do?
48.
48. So here's an idea. Call the listing agent. Hey, I was just curious. If I was to get you an offer, what's a reasonable acceptance period? Now, if they tell you, hey, my seller's in a nursing home, they don't email.
72 hours.
Yeah, so you should check that out, versus, they're hip, they're techies, they're on their phone, whatever. So that's one idea there. Now that's also negotiate with in that case, potentially, I'm doing a lot on buyer side tonight, but it applies to seller. The other thing I would, consider negotiating or discussing with my client. Hey, Drew, I'm happy, Drew might say, give him 5 hours. Drew, I'd be happy to do that. Let me ask you this. Again, see how I come with a question. If you were a seller and you had I'm thinking of a buyer's market, or excuse me, seller's market, so it's in favor of the sellers. If you had a property that you knew was in high demand, would you scramble to take, the first offer that came in the first day on the market, or would you wait 2 or 3? So I'm happy to, and this is a pause, and excuse the pause. One of the things with negotiations is try to go with their flow. So I'm not going to try to say, whoa, Drew. I ain't doing it. That's ridiculous. Some agents might, and that might be their tactic. I'd rather go with Drew. Drew, I'd be happy to do that for you because I don't want him to think I'm the obstacle. Can I share with you what my concerns are? And
So
if he says, yeah,
lead them to the conclusion themselves, kind of.
bingo. And Ben, it will take a little bit longer, but they'll probably feel like it was their decision as opposed to your decision. Now, side note, and again, I've been blessed with 2 amazing wives. My first one, I already said it, Long Island girl, raised by a Marine. She might just barely say, hey, Drew, I can do that for you, but you're just going to piss the seller off. You want to piss the seller off? She could rub a wood floor clean in one fell sentence, but so everybody has their styles, but know your buyer. Because Ben, to the right buyer, my first wife's approach might be better. Like I'm thinking she had a guy who we probably did 60 transactions with, bought a ton of foreclosures and flipped them. And she'd just be like, Scott, that is ridiculous. If you do that, this is what the buyers are going to do. So just don't even fuck around. Just do X. Now she really knew Scott and he really liked that style. But until you get to know him, don't. Side note, one of my favorite stories is I had a friend client, was a high D, and he winded up and he just said, Brian, not to be an asshole. And I said, well, Bob, then don't be one. And he paused and he stuttered and he started laughing. And he's like, that was pretty good. And then we went right back to it. So side note, yet I digress. Give your offer the best chance. And that's a combination between the right time to consider it and also all the things we probably don't have time to talk about tonight. What's the deposit? If you're paying cash on a $500,000 house, you're going to put down a $5,000 deposit? That's easy. If you get $500,000 cash, you could walk away from that like you could walk away from $100 on a table. You're doing 100% financing. Your buyer can barely come up with $2,000 to get to the closing. $500 is a big deposit to that buyer. So give your offer the best chance. KW-NAR does discourage Dear Seller letters, and I can understand why, and I can see the knowledge behind it, pictures, comments, stories, stuff like that. But that doesn't, Ben, I'll get to that one in just a second. Thank you. But don't hesitate to talk about the strengths of the buyers compared to the seller. I.e., if your seller did a lot of the work themselves, really was a wordcraft artisan. Hey, Svetlana, my buyers loved your seller's woodwork. He's been doing woodwork for the last 5 years. So I hope you can share with your seller. My buyers are passionate woodworkers and they just love what your seller did with a handrail. So I'm like, which personally model are you guys referring to with high D and other traits? I would say, thank you very much, Ben. That is the DISC personality profile, DISC. And it's all of the personality profiles out there, I have found they have validity, but they're also flawed. And flawed because if I'm well fed and happy, you're probably going to get who I am most of the time. If I haven't eaten all day, you're probably going to get a high D, even if more of a high D than I normally am, because I'm grumpy and I'm angry. Side note, know your clients well in the sense that what is their preferred communication style? What time of day? Sorry, I still haven't turned that off. What time of day is better to communicate with them? How are they better to communicate with? And communicate in the format that's best for them. I would encourage you, even if they're Gen Z or Gen X and they just missed out on their third offer, don't text them. Offer decline. It's some things we just got to do over voice. All right, I better pick up the pace a little bit. Position, acknowledge and affirm common ground. Hey, Ben, I can absolutely appreciate it. It seemed to be agreement on a closing date. Sounds like we're getting closer on price. I'm also happy to know that your seller is going to leave X, X, and Y for my clients. How do you think we can bridge this gap on the price? With apartment buildings, that could be, hey, I'm glad your seller is willing to give notice to tenant X after the inspection. I'm glad they're comfortable passing along Vermont. They have to security deposits. I know your seller is concerned about the fire safety inspection with the town. What would it look like if we offered to cover the first $5,000 of that fire safety? I'm not saying my buyers are going to do it, but hypothetically, if I got my buyers to commit to cover the first $5,000 of a code enforcement inspection, how do you feel your sellers will respond? Those are sort of trial closes, if you will. Know when to walk away. That's probably more of your client's decision than yours. Any thoughts or questions on a couple of these comments? Knowing when to walk away is one of the toughest. So side note, here, Alan, I apologize. Here's another Armstrong original. If you're representing a seller, and they're like, all right, we got Rihanna to give us the closing date. We got Rihanna to, forego X, forego this. Brian, I think I want to ask her for another $5,000. And as the seller's agent, you just feel that's going to just blow the deal. I might say, hey, Alan, again, go with the flow. I'm happy to do that. But let me ask you this. If we ask this buyer for another $5,000 after all the negotiations we just went through, and they walk, in 3 months from now, despite my best efforts to market your home in a superior fashion, we have no buyers. And a little birdie landed on your shoulder and said, that was the best offer you were ever going to get. Would you stomp on that little birdie and eat it for dinner, or would you wish it along its way? If the answer is you'd wish it along its way, I'm happy to go back and ask for another $5,000. But if you'd stomp that birdie and eat it for dinner, let's save you and the birdie the pain. In that, the tactic behind that is fear of loss. That's the little birdie one. All right.
Is that a saying in Vermont? Stomp a birdie and eat at dinner.
Yeah. All right. Take action. Instructions, sir. We're going to keep rocking and rolling through this because I can. So ahas for the last, 20, or last 10, 15 minutes. Any ahas? Let's hear 3 of them. Alan's thinking, my aha is this guy quotes way too much.
Looping.
Always
basically.
listen.
Looping. Always listen. Remember, 2 ears in one
Listening.
mouth. Yeah.
Yeah. Zip your mouth.
Zip your mouth. All right. So here's a visual analogy because I zoom in to zoom out. Thank you very much. That is a really important one. So you guys can tell with humor, I love to hear myself talk. I have, an ego, and just ask my wife. It's a challenge to deal with, which means I'm going to screw something up royally for saying this tonight. When when we launched KW, and I was doing tremendous amount of lead generation. This was December of 2009. The market, excuse my language, was in the shitter. I was drinking 2 cups of coffee, and I had to write some acronyms on the board. One was WAIT. Anybody know that acronym? Why am I talking? The other one, because I used to have 2 cups of French press, now I'm only 1. SID. Slow it down. Now, with WAIT, the analogy in my head is I was doing push-ups. So I could easily wait 30 seconds. Oh God, go 40, 45. Oh, I can feel the pain. I want to talk. Wow, today I did 45. Now I'm pushing for 50 seconds. Sometimes in negotiations, the first person to speak wins. And I think I'm doing well with silence. When somebody says, did I lose you? No, Drew. I was just listening to what you have to say. So, all right, let's keep rocking and rolling. 7:28, want to make sure I get you guys out on time. Negotiation tips. Hopefully I've been giving you a bunch of those as we went along. Again, be professional. Be a diplomat. And if you've got somebody that says something to you that torques you, if it's over a text or an email, write your response, pause for a minute, step away, and reread it. Otherwise, you may send the most amazing email you wish you had never sent. 2, if somebody hits you with a powerful negotiation point and you're not sure how to handle that, a great tactic is, Betty, that's a great question. I'd like to give you the best I have to offer, so I'd like to take a second and ponder that. Now, while I'm saying that, I'm pondering my answer. I'm just trying to slow it down. Ben, I love it. Or call them up to get a read on their tone. Great point, Ben. I had a business partner. She would send texts, and I would take them as napalm and laced things. She meant them with humorous sarcasm. Almost destroyed the business. So keep your goal in mind. Keep the goal in mind. You'd hate to go back to a client and say, well, I really gave Alan a few good zingers. It felt great. Screwed the deal, but it felt great. This is not about you. A phenomenal book that I love listening to, not so much tactics. It's Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy. Your ego is the enemy. My business partner in the team that I used to run, Cole Elwood, said, when Brian would get calls from irate clients, he would get uber calm. And it was a habit loop. I just learned to calm down, let the people speak, let them get it all out. Just sort of like I was scraping out a cancerous tumor, let them get it all out, and then go into my negotiations. Pay attention to your communication tone with anyone involved in the transaction. And don't hesitate to, possibly call some stuff out. Not in like, what the hell are you thinking? But Drew, I sense that you were a little irritated by that last request. Care to share your thoughts? Well, Brian, you said this, you said that. This was ridiculous. Your seller doesn't understand this. Your seller doesn't understand that. Hey, Ben, I appreciate that. And thank you. Even if it stings to say it, thank them for saying it, because we want them to, I hate to use this analogy, exfoliate their frustrations. Continually refer to your client's motivation when speaking with them. Hey, Drew, I can appreciate why your father's, I'm picturing your first time home buyer, your father's helping you buy a house from a market that's in the tank. I can appreciate your dad really wants to help you get a great deal. I also know that from talking with your spouse, she really wants to be in X school system. And as much as your dad wants to help you save $1, if you want to save $1 with respect, it's probably not going to happen in XYZ zip code. Right now, they're all selling for 103% of asking price. Side note, in the negotiation tactic, actually, I'll get to that. I want to make sure we have some time. I'll go through some tactics. Don't reveal too much. Listen more than you talk. Keep your motivations, to your client's motivation close. Now, there's times where your client might say, tell everybody I'm motivated. I once had a seller whose house was up for tax sale. A lot of people knew it. Yeah, it took, so that one was harder to keep quiet because it was public record. I literally had one buyer say, well, if he doesn't take the offer, we'll just wait to tax sale. That didn't help. Don't be attached to the outcome. Here's what I would tell you guys the analogy I would use is when you're representing sellers and buyers, you want to be so committed that there was the movie, the two women drive the car off the cliff. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Remember that movie?
Thelma and Louise.
Alan, thank you. So you want to be so committed that you will drive that car to the cliff, but get out the moment it goes over. And what I mean by that is, Alan, if you had a house to sell and you were being really piggish, I would challenge you with your rebuttals. I would say at the end, Alan, if you want me to go back and Drew and ask him for an extra 50 grand, I will be at peace if he walks away from the deal. Will you? Silo, there's another phrase, powerful phrase. My clients will be at peace with that. Will yours? And then let it sit for a second. All right, we'll keep rocking and rolling on that one. And come on. Did we really get to the end already? All right. So let's do this. Before we get to some ahas, I want to share with you guys some of my favorite negotiation tactics. We've already covered a couple of them. So looping, restating what the person has said to make sure you heard them. Chris Voss will tell you that there's a massive difference between you're right and that's right. Your right is the kiss of death in negotiations. Anybody have teenagers here? You used to get, yeah, Dad, you're right. You're right. You're right. That's just saying, yeah, I get you, but screw you. Excuse my language this late in the day. That's right, Chris Voss contends, is meaning that you nailed where they're at and you understand them. And again, one of the biggest things we desire as humans is to be heard and to be understood. Fair trade. Now, negotiations, I would argue in the lead generation phase, you're negotiating for an appointment. So, Ben, if you and I were to get together and have a 30-minute exploratory conversation about how I could potentially save you time and money, would that be worth 20 to 30 minutes of your time? Fair trade. Another example might be you're negotiating side of buyer client. So as a side note, this is a state-specific situation, but I'll use a hypothetical if you're in Vermont, because I can work with buyers as customers in Vermont if the other brokerage is offering broker's agency. So, hey, Ben, I can absolutely appreciate it. So I'll give you the backdrop on this one. I get an internet lead. Ben wants to go CX. My goal long-term is to get a buyer-client agreement. Yet Ben doesn't want to come into a consult for the office. I tried 2 or 3 times. So at that point, personally, I would move to meet him at the appointment, assuming I could respect the NAR settlement and Vermont regulations, which I can in that case. So I would meet Ben at the property, and then I'm going to exhibit what's called, I'd probably say fair trade and a takeaway. So I'd go through the consumer information disclosure in Vermont. I'll say it really quick. Hey, Ben, just to let you know, in the state of Vermont, Governor Scott, whether you love the man, hate the man, voted for the man, requires that first substantial contact, again, not so fast, guys. First substantial contact with real estate agents, they discuss with you how you can work with a real estate agent. In Vermont, you can work with a real estate agent as a customer, which right now you are technically a customer. At the same time, as a customer, I explain the pros and cons of the options on the contract, why one party would choose option A, why another party would choose option B. I just can't advise you. And if you tell me that this is the house of your dreams and you're going to start at $1, and I exaggerate to drive point side, but you're going to go to 20 million as a customer, I need to pass that along to the seller and their agent. The other option is we can become clients. The benefit of clients, now I can explain the pros and cons of the options. I can actually advise you based upon my 30 years in the industry, what's the best option for you. The other thing is we can play poker. If you tell me you're going to start at $1, but you're going to go to 20 million because it's the house of your dreams, my job is to convince the seller they're getting a hell of a deal at an offer. Now, I respect, we just met each other today. You don't know me, I don't know you, and you probably don't want to sign a long-term agreement. But I'm going to recommend that we sign an agreement for one day. And the next time we get together, we actually have a further conversation if we're a good long-term fit. Because after all, I'm just getting to know you, but I don't know the seller, and I'd rather represent you, somebody that I know. I rushed right through it, but the takeaway was I wasn't trying to close for a 90-day or 180-day buyer-client agreement. Side note, another example of a takeaway might be, hey, and I think I used this one last time. Actually, I'll skip that one because I did. All right. So another one is a feel, felt, found. Feel, felt, found. So you talk with you're negotiating with expireds, but you can negotiate, certainly apply this to offers as well. Drew tells me he's just going to go with the agent that had his house listed previously. Hey, Drew, I can absolutely appreciate how you feel. Agents probably put a lot of time and effort into it. I've actually talked with a lot of sellers who felt the same way. Do you know what they found was? There was a lot of money on the line, and getting a second opinion either confirmed their decision to stay with the same agent or told them it was time to explore a new relationship. Now, feel, felt, found done really well is where you ask, how they feel, or excuse me, what they found, and then you get the person to say, no, what? And invite them in. Feel, felt, found. We can apply it to buyers. Hey, I can absolutely appreciate how you feel, wanting to go in at 90 cents on the dollar, save $1. I can absolutely appreciate that. I've had actually a lot of buyers that buying in South Burlington have felt the same way. Do you know what they found was? If they wanted to be in one of the top 4 school districts in the state, they often had to actually go above asking price. Anybody care to guess why feel, felt, found is such an effective tactic?
It focuses in on our emotional needs.
Emotional needs plus our desire to be like others. Feel, felt, found. Another one, I think I might have mentioned this last time I taught. Tell me more about that. Hey, Brian, my sellers were less than enthralled with your offer. Tell me more about that, Drew. Why was that? Well, they felt the offer was really low. Can you share me with that? I mean, can you help me out with some comps? Because I looked at the comps on 123 Smith Street and, help me help you. What am I missing? Why does your seller feel that their house is worth 500 when the comps I'm running are at 450? Now, side note, that's one negotiation tactic I haven't covered. If you're representing a buyer and you're having trouble comping out a property, and I'm assuming this house has either been on the market a little while or it might sit a while. I'm assuming it's not a hot property. Hey, Rena, I was looking at 123 Smith Street. I've got some buyers that are interested, but could you help me with something? Rena, if you don't mind, role play with me if you're up for it.
Okay.
How'd you come up with the price?
We did a comparative market analysis.
Would you mind sending me the comps along? Because again, I'd love to do a deal with you, but I'm just having a little hard time coming up with the numbers. Now, pause and thank you, Rena, for willing to role play with me briefly this late in the day. Some
welcome.
agents will give you great answers. And they'll say, well, here's what we did in the comparative analysis. What you're going to see on comp one is it had more of this, that, and they may give me some great information. The other reason why I tell you to ask that question potentially of a property is if it's been sitting a little while. If you get a lesser negotiator, be like, oh yeah, I told my seller it was overpriced. I had trouble comping it too. The seller just wanted the price. And then I realized I may be able to use, I'm not going to say your name, Rita, I just said it, the listing agent as a leverage in presenting the offer. And because that tells me right off the bat, the seller's out of touch with the market. All right. This is a Phil Jones. What's your experience with X? Ben, going back to one of your original questions, buyers coming in low. Hey, Ben, if you don't mind me asking, what's your experience buying properties in South Burlington? Well, I don't know. I just moved here from Florida and we're seeing properties go for 70 cents on the dollar. Great. Well, then I'd go into, I don't know if you know this, but South Burlington is a little bit different than Tampa Bay, Florida, blah, 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 blah. Because I'm trying to, so Sun Tzu has a quote, never have your troops scale well-fortified walls. They will only have flaming arrows and hot, oil shot at them and poured down on them. So asking questions lowers the walls. All right. I mentioned this earlier. Go with the flow and the energy. Again, we used the example earlier. If somebody hypothetically wanted cute cat Ben, I like that. You got style. Side note, I swear my next two cats, I'm getting them train leased and I love motorcycles. There's a guy on Instagram that gets his cat on the motorcycle. I'm going to figure that out. Yet we digress. All right. So try to go with the flow. And again, there's times just to hit people head on, but there's times to go with the flow. They ask you to do something. Hey, I'm happy to do that. Can I share with you my concern? If I do X, then blank might happen, and are you at peace with that? Side note, give you another, everybody good with their time, bringing value, getting value from this stuff? Okay. So here's a quick story. Side note, I think I may have mentioned the last class I taught. People go from 3% to 2.5%, it's like 0.5%, right? Or wrong. It's 17% of 3%. So we had both sides of the transaction, two different KW agents. We had a buyer, and I hope I don't offend anybody. If I do, please don't report me to the region, but please tell me so I can grow. If I understand correctly, this gentleman had 7 children, I think 2 different baby mamas, and had an 8th child on the way with a new girlfriend, and he hadn't moved out of his house with the second wife. So contractor, we represented him. He was going to go after hardball play on vermiculite, but he also told our agent he's going to make a play for it, but he's not going to fix it. And so he wanted a full 1% off because he said, hey, Keller Williams has both sides of this. And he was calling our agent insulting names. You can tell me our service sucks. You can tell me the agent's incompetent, but you start using descriptive like they're an ass, they're this, they're that, they're stupid. I get pissed. And not a lot gets me pissed, at least in the real estate world. So I said to the gentleman, well, let me ask you this, sir. You're a contractor. You're about 80% done a job, and your client comes to you and says, we're going to cut your fee 17%. This is a powerful negotiation tactic. If the shoe was on the other foot, help me understand, how would this conversation go? Notice I try to slow down the rate of speech. I use some emphasis on points. And then you guys don't believe I can do this, but I actually shut up. And there was a long pause. And I knew his predicament. His baby was due and he was still with his other. Hey, that's his lifestyle. I'm not passing judgment. I'm more Jimi Hendrix. You're the one that's going to die when you get a time for you to die. Live your life the way you want to. But he said, well, if you don't do it, I might just terminate the deal. Sir, we are at peace with that. Are you? I'll call you back. Click. 5 minutes later, we'll do the deal. It was just asking him a question. Will you be at peace with that? All right. Think last time I talked about sweet questions. Buyers, what are the 4 key factors you're looking for? What are the 4 key factors looking for in the agent that you hire to sell your house? Sweep questions to a listing, to a buyer's agent. Hey, can you tell me a little bit about the buyer and of all the homes out there? Why 123 Smith Street? Side note, and I'll tell you another story, and we're going to ride it out. And you can leave if you have to, but we'll ride it right to 758, 759 Old Bail. So again, getting the walls down. So this goes back a ways. We represented the seller. Real tough inspection negotiation. I did know the agent from realtor meetings. Very nice guy, very gregarious. So we went through a variety of options, the validity of the inspection concerns, because I was talking with the agent to see how concerned they were about the items, but I was also trying to get him comfortable in getting the walls down. Now, this at the time was more of a balanced to a buyer's market. So after I asked all these questions, I said, David, of all the properties out there, why this house for your buyers? Oh, Brian, they really love it. Secondly, it's an easy commute. It's like 7 to 10 minutes to where they work. They've also got friends in the neighborhood. In fact, they even got a babysitter in the neighborhood. What do you think I used in my reply? Hey, I've talked to a seller and they're willing to do X, X, and Y. And hopefully if your buyer's really looking for that short commute, friends in the neighborhood, and a built-in babysitter, they'll consider my seller's request and agree to move on. And so I got the walls down. I got the goals. I tried to, as their slides told us, keep the other side focused on their goals. All right. Think I used this one earlier. Other than the almighty dollar, what could I do to make your seller smile? Or what could our buyers do to make your seller smile? Thoughts, questions, and let's, we'll use the last, we got 7, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, but any questions A to Z, challenges, pushbacks on anything that we discussed tonight? Alan, if you don't mind me asking, tell me what you're thinking. Saw some face moves, some back and forth. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I actually love it. I love the stories, love everything you're saying. I haven't had any transactions, so I'm like just barely starting. So it's all new, but it's great. Like I'm a dual career, so I'm still trying to find my way, but I'm loving it. Excellent stuff.
So thank you. So a couple of things let's comment on and appreciate your authenticity. So one negotiation tactic to think about when you're negotiating getting transactions is there's times to rely on you. If you're on a team, there's times to rely on a team, or there's times to rely on the market center. So for example, I don't know which market center you're with, but if you were with KW Vermont and you could say, hey, by choosing to work with me, you're choosing to work with one of the top firms in the state, and you're choosing to work with 170 agents to better help you find the home that you're looking for. And that was a little bit rough, but you see how I positioned it, that the strength is the team that I'm on. Side note, Call of Duty, video game player when I have time, which is not often, ultimate weapon is team. So there's also times to compete on your, thing. So if it was a friend or family member that might have just said, hey, Alan, you're a great guy. This is business, and I'm just a little concerned about, working with friends. I might reply to that, and this tactic is whatever they use against you, you have to invert or use right back at them, like think like a boomerang. So Alan, first, appreciate you sharing that with me. But the reason why I would consider hiring me is number one, you're going to hire one of the, top firms in the entire state to help you find the next great place to call home. And respecting that we've known each other for 15, 20 years, I appreciate at times it could get odd, it could get challenging, things could go well, things could hit challenge. Who do you think is more vested in you and your spouse finding the next great home? Some agent you've never met before? Or somebody who's known you and played poker with you and barbecued with you for 15 years? So another tactic I touched on is inverting the question. So somebody might say in negotiations with sellers, I don't need an agent. I can handle this. I can do it myself. Pause. That is one to definitely go with the flow. Because if you said, no, you can't, you're implying that they're an idiot. So, hey, I have, Alan, you're absolutely correct. You could absolutely do this on their own. But the question you may be asking might not be the right question. What do you mean, Brad? The question you may want to ask yourself is if 94% of transactions involve a real estate agent, at what point is hiring a real estate an investment or an expense? Well, what do you mean? If I could prove to you that I could save you time and money and possibly pay for my commissions through the value that I bring you, is that an expense or is that an investment? Not perfect. These are role plays, but you can see it. Invert the question. So who was on earlier? I can't remember. It might have been Diana. I think we were talking about, was it buyers and offers? If somebody said, well, hey, are we warm? And I'll paint the picture. Let's say I'm picking on a dad from Florida. Don't know who he is. I lost my train of thought. Well, give me a second to get the question back. Are we warm? Diana, you tell me. South Burlington, average property selling. I'm using South Burlington a lot tonight. It's my hometown. You tell me. Average property selling for 103%. This house made you smile from ear to ear. And we wrote an offer that's 90 cents on the dollar. What do you think? How are we doing? Drew, did you like that one?
That's great. My question's been for you, and I think you've answered to this a lot tonight, but maybe you're the wrong person to answer this because clearly you enjoy negotiation. You've been doing it for a long time, but when you feel like you're outclassed by the other agent, when you can feel, all right, they're a great negotiator, what are some tactics you would recommend?
So great question. The first answer is not be a wise ass. Try to learn from them. Take their notes. There are two, and I mean this is a compliment, two badass, powerful women brokers in our office. And again, I believe in diversity in every aspect of the phrase. And they are, one of them I call a B-52 carpet bomber. She will get the deal done. She might salt the earth on the way to closing. But I know that every time I'm dealing with her, I am going to learn something. And so I just buckle up and go for it. Now, what I would do more specifically is compliment them. Hey, Drew, you got a great reputation. I know you do a shitload of deals. And to be candid with you, this is going to be my first or second transaction. I'd love the opportunity to not only do business with you and get to the closing with you, I'd love the opportunity to learn from you. Now, you might evoke some sympathy, some empathy. There are some agents, and you probably have names of them, that would just eat it for lunch, and spit you out if you said that. But I would also challenge you, Drew, just accept it. And if it doesn't feel great, do the best you can. Lean on your team leader, lean on other agents in the office. Take a look at the DISC personality profile, but don't give up. you know. But what I wouldn't try to do is overpower them I would probably sort of proverbially bow down to them. And I don't mean tell them everything about my client. Hey, Drew, I can see it. You know, you run a big team, you do 100 transactions a year. You know, again, I'm a dual career agent, just got going. But what I can tell you is I think the world of my buyers, they really love your seller's house. And I would love to see if we could help both your seller and my buyers. Side note, a lot of people, not everybody, love to help others. So sometimes asking for that help is showing weakness can be strength, if that makes sense. You know, and side note, guys, let's see, Alan, thank you for your question. Is there a specific place to take the personality profile? There's a couple places to take the DISC. I think Tony Robbins actually used to do it for free. It might be $20 now. It's worth the $20. And I would also ask your team leader, your market center's productivity coach to do a DISC class. Quick history on the DISC for me. I was in a hotel room in Dallas, a small conference room, Dallas, Texas. A woman by the name of Diane Dobbins, former Mike Ferry coach, walked around the room, shook people's hand and said, you're this type, you're that type, you're this type, you're that type, and then had us answer a quick questionnaire. She was wrong on 2 of them. So the DISC, you can use rate of speech, handshake, style of vehicle that they drive. Now, this doesn't work if it's potentially from different country, you know, stuff like that. I think there may be some limits there. But for example, I was dealing with a Nepalese individual, great gentleman, worked with, with rentals. And some of the head gestures were just different gestures than I was used to. Like he was shaking his head and I was starting to get irritated. Like, is he telling me shaking his head? No, like I'm bullshit. His supervisor was like, no, he's just actually processing it. So hopefully I didn't offend anybody. If I did, let me know so I can grow. Also with the DISC, understand, and one of the reasons why I like Tony's Robbins assessment is they have it listed natural type in I forget was not unnatural. There's a second phrase. Now, what I mean by that is if we all have to get on and tap dance, be it negotiation, be it this, we can become a chameleon. But over time and under stress, our ability to be a chameleon will fade and the real us will come out. Another negotiation tactic on the DISC, if you're meeting with 2 people, let's say you're negotiating with your client to help them write a, strong offer or accept an offer that's lower than they want to accept. Do not make the basic mistake of focusing only with the lead in the relationship, because the other person might be quiet and you might be thinking, I got to deal with a decision maker. Isn't there a book about that? Then at that point, what happens when you leave the room? My argument would be the quiet one speaks up. I don't like Brian. He didn't ask me any questions. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. So when I'm negotiating with buyers to help them rate specific offers or sellers to help them take offers lower than they want to take, but really should take. If Ben, you were the quiet one, and I hope I pronounced it, Slitvania, if I don't think I pronounced that correctly, my apologies, was doing all the talking, I might just say, hey, Ben, you've been relatively quiet in this conversation. What are you thinking? Not how do you feel? I feel frustrated. That didn't really help me. What are you thinking? Brian, this offer is way too low for us to accept. We paid more for this property 3 years ago. This is ridiculous. Good. I wouldn't say good to him. I'd say good to me because I'm getting to their motivation. I can go a few more minutes if you guys want, or we can bail, whatever works for people. What are the questions that anybody have? Do you guys want to rock and roll?
I just want to echo that what you were saying there. When you've got somebody who's quiet, asking them directly, what are you thinking about that? Yeah, that's a great. I'm definitely that person in a large group. I'm going to sit back and listen, but my brain is churning and I'm ready to say something, but I'm probably not unless somebody's going to ask, you know. So love that tactic. That's good.
Great point. So here's what I'd say if there's not any more questions. First, thank you for taking the time. And while I didn't read all the things I was supposed to read off the PowerPoint, hopefully my passion for the topic carried you guys through. Secondly, if you guys are dual career, one, don't hang your head in shame of that. I one time joked that I didn't hire, I managed a large C21. I used to joke that, hey, I don't hire dual career people. Guy behind me laughed. I literally turned around and said, all right, wise ass, why are you laughing? And he said, I just bought the company that told me that 5 years ago. But here's what I would tell you if you're dual career. One, draft a very, let me just reply to my wife. Hang on a second. One, draft a vision of where you want to be in 3 to 5 years. I think I touched on this last one. Personally, professionally, spiritually, what does your financial life look like? What are the experiences you're having? And paint it in present day tense. And sorry, this is going to get a little deep for you guys. I shared this a little bit last time. Lost my first amazing wife to cancer, so I can't piss off my second amazing wife because I've been blessed. 2 weeks after she passed, it was brutal. My world was pulverized into tiny grains of sand. I rewrote my future self because I knew I had a lot of energy that was going to be positive or destructive. I had a challenged relationship with my stepson. In my future self, I wrote down that we had more positive relationship than ever before, that we've heliboarded, that we snowboard on a regular basis, and we tell each other we love each other. I have the best relationship I've ever had with him. We tell each other we love you more than we told in the other 20 years combined. And it's because I wrote it down and I wanted to make it happen. The financial aspect of that will remind you of when you've got a choice. Go home, play a video game, go home and work on your database. You got a powerful experience ahead of you. It'll help you remember. Maybe put down the Xbox 360 tonight, work on your database. Also, if you're dual career, know when to lean on yourself, know when to lean on the entire team if you're on a team or the market center that is the team. Alan, that's a great situation. Also, a lot of you may have experiences that really add validity to your real estate. For example, if you were an ops person at XYZ company and you oversaw X millions of dollars of commerce a year, maybe it was a trucking company. It's coordination of delivery of goods and services. What do we do as real estate agents? We coordinate delivery of goods and services, mortgages, insurance, finding a home. Correlate those. If you're a teacher or a nurse, you have an amazing ability as teachers and nurses to impart information. I've been, a nurse for 25 years, and as that's one of the best things about working with me. I know what it's like to explain complicated details and work with people to educate them. Probably the last 2 or 3 thoughts, and you guys got to hang up on me, and I got to go spend some time with family. Then I would also say, to the degree that you can, focus on sellers because it's easier to work sellers as your dual career. The other thing as well, too, is manage expectations. Meaning that, hey, I'm available generally to X. So put some time in the middle of the day if you can, squeeze out voicemail, stuff like that, and become so good at negotiations. They don't know whether you're full-time or you're dual career, whatever the case is, because you're that good. And I will tell you this, and Alan, I believe you could do this. If you study those books and you study the art and start practicing it with friends and families, not in maniacal ways, but in productive, healthy ways, you will probably be able to out-negotiate a lot of experienced agents who may have been in this business 20 years, but never read a damn book on negotiations or practiced it. Also embrace it. You don't know what can't be done. So with that being said, guys, I got to rock and roll. I am grateful for your time. I put my contact email, my assistant's email. If you have any questions, want any information, want to grab a 15, 20-minute phone call, I'd be happy to do that. All I ask is you take what we discussed tonight and put it to use for your family, for your goals, for your dreams. Because we work in an amazing industry. We get to help people start great new chapters of their lives. But also remember, you're making a choice. If you don't like where you work and you choose not to work in your database and make some calls and practice this, you are choosing to work where you work. If you love real estate and want to get into it full time, you're choosing to suffer through the startup period. But as I said last time, I think joy has less to do with avoiding suffering and more to do with suffering for worthy endeavors. That note, guys, appreciate you. Go out and bare your teeth at your goals, slay, I was going to use the F-bomb, dragons, and live a damn good life. Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Brian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, we appreciate it.
Enjoy.